Let's talk about entering the digital accessibility marketplace. The title of this presentation is ADA Title II Web Accessibility Buyer's Guide, and at the bottom of the slides is accessible.org. The objective of this presentation is to guide public entities towards the services they need for compliance and away from the products they don't need. Obviously, this presentation is tailored to public entities who are working towards compliance with the new web accessibility rule under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, but this information can help everyone. So in this next slide, I have frame, and that is because I want to frame your thinking as you are going through this presentation. We not only have limited money for our project, but we have limited time. We can't waste either. And the quick takeaway, if you stop watching after the slide, is that shopping for accessibility isn't like wanting a candy bar, going into Walmart, and then buying that candy bar. Digital accessibility sellers are trying to trick you. And then on this next slide, I have worse than Las Vegas, because at least in Las Vegas, you have a chance. And there is a photo of a group of people who are playing roulette. But the point here is that you are against the odds. There is a research firm who their entire job is to write up reports on industries, and they still didn't get this industry right. So it is so important that you are aware of what is going on in digital accessibility. And on this next slide, I have a question to pose to you to keep in mind as we're going through this presentation. Does this move me? Does this product or service move me on a seamless incremental path towards WCAG 2.1 AA conformance? That is the question you should have in mind as you are researching different sellers. So what happens is seller rerouting. So you know that your current objective is to make your digital assets WCAG 2.1 AA conformant. So we have an arrow that is pointing right, and then we have this another arrow that starts at the top, works its way to the bottom, then works its way back to the top, and then ultimately points down or sideways against the arrow that is pointing right. And then at the end, we have another arrow that is pointing straight right. The point here is that sellers reroute you away from your direction. So they reroute you how they want you to go. So it is important that you are not rerouted. And let's talk about how sellers reroute you. On this slide, I have quote, unquote, value adds. And there is a picture of a group, a plate of sandwiches where the sandwiches are mostly bread and lettuce. And then so one of the bullet points I have is lots of filler, but the story always sounds good. They've got a really good story that they walk you through. And so what happens is you will have something that has real value, and then you will have the filler around the real value. So on this next slide, let's say we go to Digital Accessibility Co. and they tell us we offer an audit, and then I have a smile emoji because that's what we want to hear. That is part 1 of 2 of exactly what we need. But then they say it comes with our platform. So then I have an unsure emoji, and then they add and our software, another unsure emoji, and automated testing and monitoring. And so we have these 4 unsure emojis after we have this original audit. And so this gets back to the previous slide. We have some value, but it is surrounded by filler. So on this next slide, I have the value sandwich. We have the audit, and let's say the audit's value to us, or what we would pay, is $5,500. It is one of 2 essential services that we need for WCAG 2.1 AA conformance, but it's surrounded by extras. So then I have, let's say, $14,500 of extras for a total of $20,000. But these extras, we don't need them, and we never asked for them. All right, so one of the fillers is a platform. So platforms are commonly sold in digital accessibility. The problem is they are a low value for WCAG 2.1 AA conformance. There is some benefit to a platform. It can help you with organization. It can help you with managing what you're doing. But the problem is these platforms are so grossly overpriced, they return a horrible value. So platforms are often scan-based, which also is problematic, but they look and feel nice. So you will get the graphics, you will get the charts, you will get the progress reports, possibly maintenance. Everything looks nice. There's pie charts, there are scores, but what you need versus what you are being sold are 2 different things. And so recognizing that there is some benefit in having a platform that helps you stay organized, helps you manage what you are doing, works you through your timeline, I created the accessible.org project platform using Google Sheets. And so this is available for free. I will link to it in the description. The point here is that, yes, you want to stay organized and you want to be able to manage your project, but you don't need to pay thousands of dollars on an annual subscription to do so. On this next slide, I have package scan. So scans are helpful. Scans have there's benefit to using scans, but when we are using scans in the sense that we are going to a seller and they are selling us on a package scan, so maybe it's a scan package with their platform, Scans are helpful, but how does it fit with the services? Because if we are asking for an audit service, what are we going to do with the scan in the meantime? Does that mean we scan and we start working on the scan? Well, that's going to mess up the audit, because the audit needs the website, the auditor needs the website to stay static while they are going through it and finding accessibility issues. Also, if we have a remediation service, how are we using the scan? Are we fixing things ourselves? Are they fixing things at the same time? My point here is this is a jumbled process and it doesn't make any sense. So again, we go back to this question: does this move me on a seamless incremental path towards WCAG 2.1 AA conformance? On this next slide, I just have a circle with 83% in the middle, and then we have this progress bar around the circle. And this is because so many people are focused on these scores. And while, yes, it is always best practice to have a 100% score on a scan, we always want scans to show zero errors, zero issues, zero alerts if possible. But this puts the focus in on the wrong place, because our focus needs to be on WCAG 2.1 AA conformance and not towards a progress bar of a scan. Obviously, we want to resolve all of the issues that are detected by scans or flagged by scans, but scans only flag a limited subset of WCAG 2.1 AA success criteria. So think of scans as flagging 12 success criteria of the 50 that comprise WCAG 2.1 AA. So the point here is that there are so many people that get fixated on these scores, and these scores are entirely skewed and not what our end objective is. Again, our end objective is not 100% score on a scan. It is WCAG 2.1 AA conformance. Those are two different things. The 100% scan score comes as a result of the full conformance, but it is not what we are moving towards. So to put scans in context, if we have a service provider that tells you we use scans to ensure our audit is robust, so to help reduce incidents of error, to accelerate our process and make our process more efficient, so to help us locate potential accessibility issues, and then we manually review the scan results, that is that is how you use scans. And then you, as the client, can also use scans for free. So if you want to use a scan, you don't have to pay for it. The Wave scan is excellent. It's beginner friendly. It will even help educate you and help familiarize you with web accessibility as you are using the scan. The Act scan is tailored more towards developers, but the point is, if you want access to scans, you can access scans right now for free. So on this next slide, I actually have, I think, 3 slides in a row where I talk about sellers. So let's go through some bullet points. The first is, don't learn from sellers. Don't learn while you're on sales calls. And I recognize the irony here being that I am a service provider, but in general, you don't want to learn about what you need from sellers, because they will try to sell you things that you do not need. On this next bullet, I have alignment. And again, we get back to what do you need versus what they are selling. Note the divergence between the two things. Also, sellers, some red flags to look out for sellers. If they are talking in generalities, if they are conflating terms, so they are referring to audits, if they are referring to scans as audits, that would be an example of conflating terms. If they are blurring things, if they are trying to confuse the issue, these are all red flags. And this is why it helps so much when you research and you learn about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and web accessibility in general before you go to procure services. So continuing on with sellers, we will see a smoothing over. Again, this goes back to generality. They will smooth over their offering because they have to make it seem like it fits into this incremental, seamless path that you are going on. They will downplay manual services. They will always acknowledge manual services because they can't get around that. Everybody knows you need manual services for accessibility, but what they will do is they will emphasize the automated quote unquote testing, or they will say that you can combine the automated with manual. There is no combining. We need a full manual review. We need to fully manually evaluate a website to determine all of the accessibility issues, and then we need to fully manually remediate all of the accessibility issues. There is no such thing as automated remediation, at least not right now. We'll wait to see what AI comes up with, but not right now. So when it comes to sellers, also when you're on the call with sellers, state what you need, or on the email, state what you need, and then let them talk. It is always a red flag if they reroute the conversation to a compliance solution or anything that is automated, any software. Always look for the rerouting of the conversation. Another red flag is when you hear the word journey. So this gets into, this is not going to end. We are going to drag this on as long as possible. No, there's a start point and there's an end point. The start point is where you are right now. The end point is WCAG 2.1 AA conformance for your digital assets. And then you start training so that you can get rid of the service provider or reduce the need for the service provider. And then ultimately accessibility is in-house. So when it comes to shopping for services, note that services are not a one-to-one quality. So seller A and seller B are two entirely different sellers that could be offering two entirely different things. So even if they're offering PDF remediation, for example, with one set with remediation from one seller, you might be getting a perfectly accessible PDF. With remediation from another seller, you might be getting remediation up to a point. So think of one seller as returning a 10 of 10 document and another seller as returning a 5 of 10 document. So again, you don't want to commoditize accessibility services because they are not the same thing. So I have other services as audits and remediation. And then on this next slide, I have the doctor analogy. So just think about when you go to a doctor. If you have two doctors, both are licensed, but one is good and one is bad. So one you feel comfortable with, and the other you feel like you're wasting your time and your money every time you go to them. One pushes a subscription for a pill. The other says to rest and relax. There are differences. Even if they're both licensed, there's a difference between the doctors. So they can range. They can be bad, okay, good, great. And the same applies in the service provider marketplace. All right, so now let's talk about the right path. What do you need to work towards? Research will help you get on the right path and stay on the right path. The first bullet point I have is to study WCAG 2.1 AA. Even if it's just for 30 minutes and you go through my guide and my checklist, this is going to help you throughout the compliance process. Next, focus on service providers as opposed to people who are trying to sell you software and automation. So focus on service providers, look through 3 to 5 service providers, talk to them and get a feel for them. So what rapport do you have with them? What are they offering? Are they aligned with exactly what you need? And then of course, price is always a consideration. And then on the third bullet point, I have read about tools, software, etc. And this is so you can put them in context. And then last, I have WCAG 2.1 AA training. The more members of your committee, so the more people you have in-house who are familiar with WCAG 2.1 AA, the more it's going to help you. All right, so on this next slide, I have right the first time. It is so much better to research more now, pay more now, than to find out later you purchased the wrong thing or you received poor quality service. All right, so on this next slide, I have training. Let's talk about why training can be so helpful. So your team can learn accessibility for their respective roles. And this is not impossible. Even though you might think accessibility is too confusing right now, it is definitely not that confusing. So it's not impossible. If your team starts to train now and then gain experience throughout this compliance process, it's really going to help you as you work towards WCAG 2.1 AA conformance, and then you stay conformant. So right now, you have a disjointed accessibility process. You create, then you remediate, right? So before you weren't remediating, now for compliance, you are remediating. So you're creating a website or you're creating content, and then you are fixing it so that it's accessible. What we want to do is we want to create and be done. And the way we do this is we integrate accessibility into our process. How do we do this? Well, we need people who are proficient in accessibility and they have training on the web content accessibility guidelines. So let's take the different members of your digital team, and let's say they are new right now, but then throughout this process, they start to become proficient because they are training on the web content accessibility guidelines. And then as they put WCAG into practice and they gain experience, they start developing expertise. That's where we want to be. We want to get to a point where we rely less and less upon service providers. But initially, obviously, we need to source this work because we just don't have the experience, expertise, and knowledge in-house. So we want to source. But when we source and we make our digital assets WCAG 2.1 AA conformant, we want to build upon that foundation. We don't want to undo it. So we don't want our team, someone from our team adding, let's say our content editor, they're writing a blog post and they're introducing accessibility issues onto our blog. Or let's say we have a developer who we contract with, and this developer is editing our code, but they are doing so in an inaccessible manner. They're not following best practices. They're not familiar with the web content accessibility guidelines. So your developer is editing the code and they're introducing new accessibility issues. So the point here is we want to train all the while so that all of this service work doesn't get undone by this disjointed process that we have, where we have our different team members of our digital team that are creating, or they're uploading, or they're adding, and then we have to work on accessibility. No, we want to integrate accessibility into our process. And the reason why I go on and on about this is because it reduces our costs over time. So we're no longer in the disjointed process. And so whereas we have to source out most of the work now, as our team starts to become proficient and develop expertise in accessibility, our costs start to go down. So on the slide, I have a photo of a clear, dry erase board where we have someone who is starting off with, they write costs, and then we have this line that's plateaued, and then it starts to slope downward all the way to the bottom because we've trained on accessibility. And so now we have to spend less on accessibility. It's a part of our process. Okay, on this next slide, I just have proactive in advancing. So throughout this process, start with education, organize your efforts, and then you need to be proactive and really start advancing, because in the end, we want to reach full WCAG 2.1 AA conformance, but it does take some time to get there. So in this next slide, I have building blocks. And remember, again, incremental process. So there's a picture of someone dropping the fourth block of a group of blocks that start off with 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks. And the point here is that we are building upon our previous efforts. We don't want to get set back. We don't want to move sideways. We want to continue ascending up in our progress. So I have a straight line that runs parallel with these blocks that are being stacked upon each other in successive fashion. And then I have another jagged line where we start moving straight and then we go back sideways and back and forth. And this is what happens if you get rerouted by sellers who are selling you products that you don't need. You become engrossed in their ecosystem that they want you to be in, but not what you actually need. So you actually need the services so that you have, let's say you have the audit, and then you build on top of the audit with the remediation. That's going to lead us to this seamless incremental process. And then we have training, and then we have possibly our team working on different content. So we have the code remediation, and then we have the content remediation. So that's a part of this. When we're remediating, we need to keep in mind for our websites, there's the code aspect of this, which is technically advanced, but there's also content. So just think of videos and images and any audio files that we have and documents. We source the work out for remediation or audits on these different things to the respective people who are appropriate to be working on them. Sometimes it's our content team. We don't need to source out work, let's say, for describing images, because our team can describe the images. So just keeping this in mind, we want to make incremental, seamless progress. So I'm not saying that with let's say there's a seller who is selling you a platform, you can still make progress, but it's going to be slowed down, and it's because you're going to be caught in all of these things that they're trying to pretend add value, but really don't in meeting your objective. So on this next slide, I have move the needle, and we have a progress meter. It starts off with red. We have this orange section, then we have a yellow section and a green section, and the needle is pointing towards the green. And that's what we want to do. We want to get to this other side of the meter where we are at full WCAG 2.1 AA conformance, and we have a number of digital assets and different digital content that we need to make conformant. But just keep this in mind. Again, progress. We need to see the needle move to the right. We don't want to get caught. We don't want to be mired, let's say, in the second phase where we are in this orange section where we're caught in the second phase and we're not really making progress. So we need to continually make progress and have that progress where we actually meet our objective. So going back to our digital accessibility co-example, what's important to know about digital accessibility companies is ideally they want to limit their professional services. They want to be known as tech companies and have tech in quote. So they like to be thought of as offering software as a service. And the reason why is because there is recurring revenue there, there's subscriptions there, higher margins, better valuations. So Digital Accessibility Co. is selling you what they want to sell you, but not necessarily what you need. Remember earlier, I talked about the filler. There's a lot of filler. Sometimes they recognize they can't get away from the manual services, but they want to sell you on software because software is scalable for them. They can charge you on a subscription, but that's not what you need. Even if the subscription was helpful, right? Even if you did want an audit every year to be conducted, okay, then you have that subscription. But what they are selling is not moving the needle for you. We talked about moving the needle. We need to be at the end. We don't need to be distracted and rerouted on our path. So on this next slide, I have decipher. Decipher what provides value and what does not. We need to make our assets WCAG 2.1 AA conformant. There is value in anything that helps make that process more efficient and more effective. So that's what we want to buy. So to summarize this presentation, research first, put your focus on manual services. You need to make real progress. So we need to see real progress as the weeks and months are going by. Remember, WCAG 2.1 AA is the end game. That's where we want to be. And training is so important. So start training almost immediately after you've organized what you're going to do. Training is so important to the compliance process. And then not only in making sure that you reach tag 2.1 AA conformant, but training is important so that you stay conformant. And again, we're not introducing accessibility issues. And this is why you want to develop accessibility expertise in-house so that let's say you're the developer you're contracting, a designer you're working with, let's say it's your staff, let's say it could be your employees, etc. They are able to integrate accessibility into what they do seamlessly so that it's not a part of this disjointed process. And that's going to bring our costs down way low. And so we won't need to have this ongoing budget for years and years and years. We can start to decrease that over time. Okay, and on this final slide, I have resources. The first resource is for training on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I offer training through the WCAG course, and you can sign up at wcagcourse.com. And then through accessible.org, I offer audit, remediation, and user testing services to help you reach WCAG 2.1 AA conformance. And if you need help with your project, feel free to reach out to me for consultation. I also offer consultation through accessible.org, and I will include links to all of these resources in the description.